What if I told you that weight gain is not just about counting calories and that your cravings aren't just about willpower? The real culprit here is insulin resistance. And this is something that most doctors don't even test for. So here I'm going to break down exactly how insulin resistance works, how it happens, and the two ways that you get there, and then how you can fix it fast. So let's start with what insulin actually does. And I promise to make this simple. Energy is floating around in your blood from the food that you eat. That's in the form of carbohydrates, blood sugar, and that sugar floating around in your blood needs to get into your cells here. So the only way you can do that is if that cell opens up to allow that energy to come in. Okay, so every time you eat a meal, the energy from that food needs to get into your cells here. And the way that it gets into your cells is through, I'll draw little double doors here, are receptors on the outside of your cells that are listening and waiting for insulin to come along. So insulin being the key that fits into this lock of this door and opens the door. And so now we have these double doors here are open. That's when insulin comes and docks here. Okay, so that opens up those doors so that sugar, these X's will be sugar, can now come into the cell. Right now the cell can use it for everything that a cell needs to use it for. And that's good and that's healthy and that's a normal process. We want it to happen so that your body can receive the energy it needs to do what it needs to do and live, give you energy, supply your mood, everything that we want. But the problem is when this happens too persistently over long periods of time, that this can go haywire. And so when you're eating high carbohydrate diets that are like full of carbs and refined sugars, every single meal for months and years, your body, your pancreas is forced to put out more and more insulin because there's all this sugar that you're eating in your blood now over long periods of time. And so all this sugar here requires more insulin, more and more insulin to dock here onto these receptors. Now, the problem here is that the more insulin there is in the blood constantly knocking on the door here and trying to open up this lock, the more resistant these receptors become to the signal of insulin. And so it becomes harder for them to open, right, unless you have more and more insulin over time. And this is why diabetics require taking more and more insulin over time to get the same decrease in their blood sugar to keep it balanced, because their cells are becoming more and more resistant. So this is kind of like the lock, right, is becoming worn out from this key constantly fitting in and turning it, fitting in, turning it. Over time, the structure in the lock becomes kind of worn down. Also kind of like listening to music. If you listen to music in your headphones like a lot of youngsters do, and it's pretty loud, over time, what's going to happen? Their eardrum's going to wear down, and that signal won't get through as clear, so they'll have to slowly, every year, make their music louder and louder so that they can hear the sound properly. The same thing's happening with your cells here. Okay, so your insulin levels are going up, your cells are becoming resistant to insulin. That's why we call it insulin resistance. All right, so how do you know if you're developing insulin resistance? Well, here are the most common symptoms and signs. So the first symptom is fatigue. So if you feel fatigued, especially after meals, that's a sign of insulin resistance because your body hasn't gotten the sustained energy that it should be deriving from the food in your meals. That also means it's largely up to food selection, which is very much under your control, and we're going to talk about that here shortly. Okay, that could be in the morning, breakfast, lunch, dinner, or throughout the whole day. Next is constant sugar cravings. Okay, so sugar cravings happen again because for the same reason, your body isn't getting the sustained energy it should be. And so you have this energy crash after an hour or two, and then your body's starving, looking for more easy energy. Next is belly fat. This happens because insulin is a fat storage hormone. Okay, brain fog, forgetfulness. So your brain thrives on both fat for energy and glucose, carbs for energy. But we're over reliant on the carbs. Again, we're not getting enough good fats for our brains to burn for energy, and so this can make the brain feel foggy when it just gets these quick bursts of energy, but then it's not able to sustain its energy burning because we're not giving it enough good, healthy fats, proteins in our diet. And so this is also related to the fact that researchers are now calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes because it's heavily related to your metabolism, how your body regulates its energy. Next is hormone issues, hormone imbalances. So things like PCOS or women that have irregular cycles or cycle problems. Insulin and hormones are very closely connected. And then feeling hangry. If you feel hangry after meals, this is kind of like the sugar cravings. Your mood isn't going to be stable when your body doesn't have a good, even supply of energy. Okay, then how do we test for this? So I mentioned that most doctors aren't testing for this, and here's what I mean. So most doctors do actually test for glucose, which is the sugar in your blood. And so that changes very quickly. It's very moment to moment, hour to hour. And so we want to see that generally 100 or less. From a functional medicine standpoint, we actually like to see not just what's normal, but what's truly optimal. And so what's truly optimal is a fasting glucose below 90. Regardless, another marker for blood sugar is HbA1c, that's hemoglobin A1c. Instead of showing you how your blood sugar is doing from day to day, it's showing you over a 3-month average what your blood sugar is. Okay, so this is also another great marker to screen for to assess your metabolic health overall. It shows you how well your body's regulating its blood sugar. And finally is insulin. So insulin, we've talked about already, that's the key to the lock that opens the door so your blood sugar can get into the cells. That we want, in general, most conventional docs want to see that below 25, but they only test for it when someone's already been diagnosed with diabetes. If you haven't been diagnosed with diabetes and you want to understand more about how well your body is regulating energy and blood sugar and metabolism, then you need fasting insulin. And so conventionally they want to see it below 25. Optimally, we want to see it below 5. So you can test for this. Again, most doctors aren't going to test for it, and insurance, covering it. I wouldn't always count on it. But these are all the common signs and symptoms of knowing whether you have insulin resistance, if you're on the path there, or if you're metabolically healthy. So now that we have an idea of whether we might have insulin resistance or not, then let's look at how most Americans are eating. And you might be anywhere on the spectrum. So we know that, the average American, the standard American, for breakfast, it's a carb-heavy diet. They might be eating cereal with milk and a bagel, coffee with some sugar. Okay, that's a typical American breakfast. Next, for lunch, then what are they eating for lunch? So maybe a sandwich, some chips on the side, maybe a side salad. Having a soda wouldn't be uncommon. Okay, all these things loaded with carbohydrates. Again, now for dinner. How about dinner? Is that any better? Well, most people tell me that they have, rice, say, or pasta with some meat and vegetables. So say it's chicken and some steamed veggies out of a can, or maybe you did go to the store and make some, steamed carrots and sauteed kale or something. So that's a typical breakfast, lunch, dinner. These are all very carb-heavy meals. And so, not to mention snacks in between. But what this is doing is telling your pancreas to switch on, kind of like a light switch. Just constantly putting out more and more insulin every meal, more and more insulin. And so, over time, that's going to do what to your cells? We remember from the beginning, it's going to cause your cells to become tone deaf to that signal. And it'll require more and more insulin over time to achieve the same effect. So, in this high carb world, we're just never letting our pancreas have a break, never letting our cells have a break. And so this is like running your car at full speed all day and wondering why it breaks down after a while. So now that you know how insulin resistance happens, let's talk about what you can do to fix it. And the best part about this is that it is fully within your control. Okay, it's largely food-based, some stress management habits here, all things that you can control. So the first thing that we want to do here is to lower insulin spikes. So that means cutting back on processed carbs and sugar, right? Because every time you eat, you're either spiking your insulin or keeping it low. So step one is to stop overloading your system and swap the refined carbs, the sugary foods. You want to swap those for whole foods. So think meat and vegetables, basically grass-fed meats, all organic where you can, healthy fats like avocado oil, coconut oil, olive oil, as well as the animal fats like organic grass-fed butter and the fat from organic grass-fed red meat. Okay, then we have, of course, the fiber-rich veggies. All those things are going to help decrease insulin. Okay, make your insulin more sensitive, your cells more sensitive to insulin. Right, because just think about insulin like a fire alarm. If you're eating processed carbs, that's like setting off smoke detectors in every room of your house at once. Right, so the second thing that we want to do is increase insulin sensitivity. And the way to do that is also by decreasing the amount of processed carbs in your diet, but also trying to space your meals out, okay, meal timing, because your pancreas and the rest of your digestive system, it needs a break. So one of the best ways to do this is time-restricted eating, also known as intermittent fasting. And so that can just be, a 12-hour fast, even just starting with not eating after 8 p.m. until 8 a.m. the next morning after you sleep, where you break your fast, breaking a fast. So we need a longer period of time so that your body can kind of rest and digest without having more food that it has to deal with. All right, the other way to do this is strength training. So muscle's like a sponge for carbohydrates. So the more muscle tissue that you have in your body, the better that your body will function with insulin. Even just a couple workouts a week can really improve this insulin sensitivity quickly. And the higher the intensity of that workout, the better. So again, just a few a week. Doesn't have to be much. The third important component here is reducing stress and inflammation. And so I know stress is just part of daily life. It's just kind of, that's it. It's never going to leave. Life is never going to be convenient for you. So we need to find ways to respond to that stress effectively, to become more resilient. Because remember, stress will raise cortisol, and cortisol raises your blood sugar. It's a vicious cycle. So try deep breathing, meditating. I recommend trying a guided meditation. There are many on the internet. You can just search guided meditation and learn how to control your inner state, your emotional state. Even just take a 10-minute walk outside, getting your body moving, fresh air, that all relieves stress. Right? Think about the last time that you were super stressed. Your body probably felt wired and you're tense and exhausted all at the same time. That's cortisol spiking your insulin. Okay, so then imagine the opposite, feeling calm, clear, and in control. That's what we're after here. All right, one more little secret to that is gut health again. So with most of your immune system living in your gut, we got to optimize gut health. So that's going to come mostly from the diet. All the things we've talked about already will help the gut to calm down and function at its best. All right, the fourth and last thing is to optimize sleep. This is crucial and highly underestimated because sleep is when your body has the time to rest and repair. Deep sleep, okay? When your body isn't getting that deep sleep, that is a stress in your body. Okay, so that stress again creates insulin resistance. And even one bad night of sleep, studies show, can make you just as insulin resistant as a pre-diabetic. Yes, that's true. Okay, so you want to aim for 7 to 9 hours of deep quality sleep. And if you have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, really want to work on first instituting a nightly routine. That's what we see helps the most people, kind of the best one-size-fits-all place to start, is get a good sleep routine. Get the bright lights, the blue lights out of your eyes for at least an hour before bedtime, and do things that are a little more calming. Listen to some nice music, a podcast, an audiobook. Okay, and maybe do a guided meditation before sleep. All right, so that's it. You don't need to do everything all at once. The final takeaway here, if you're just going to do one thing, is to make one change to your diet. Okay, swap out for each meal some of those carbohydrate foods for more protein and good fats. That will make the world of difference and you will feel it.